All right, so should powerlifters stay in their lane? This is going to be my thoughts. This is going to be, in general, a part response to Carell's video from Stand Strength. Should powerlifters stay in their lane? And the clip that he compiled of Matt Wenning talking about aesthetics and people that train for them, and then the response that he clipped in from Natural Hypertrophy saying that they should stay in their lane. And I'm going to give my thoughts on each of these, the nuances that I see within both of the arguments, and a couple other things kind of sprinkled in throughout this video. It's going to be a little bit of everything here. The response kind of inspired me to take a couple other ideas I had in the making and fast forward them to this video to combine it with a few different things, since there is a little bit of just nuance with the topics when it comes to these two arguments. So, should powerlifters stay in their lane? This is a response to Stan Strength's video this morning calling out Matt Wenning for what he said about people who train for hypertrophy. This video isn't going to be me getting into the technicals of training, rather the argument made by Matt and many powerlifters / bodybuilders. This is nothing personal with Matt. It happened to be the clip used. So Matt Wenning is a highly respected powerlifter. He's basically a powerlifting legend. The guy puts out a lot of good information about powerlifting, and he's achieved a ton. It is nothing personal with him. It just happened to be the clip that was used, and it's a pretty common argument from powerlifters. So it's not just him just that came up with this idea that training for aesthetics is generally bad. It's a very common idea within the powerlifting community, and that's why aesthetics and bodybuilding has been kind of put on the back burner and people look down upon it. And that's why I have my channel to show you guys the light in this actual hobby and get you guys back on the right track in an actual good, healthy, positive way, and not a negative way. So I'll get into that in a little bit. I know I kind of foreshadowed there, but let me get a little bit deeper into this video. So part one, there's going to be 3 different parts to this. I'm going to talk about Matt's argument / the powerlifting argument. I'm going to talk about the Stand Strength argument, and I'm also going to talk about the effect that this has on the community, my experience, and kind of a little bit of everything tied into there. So let me get into it. So do I agree with Matt? Let me dive deep here with a direct quote from Matt, the one that was used in this clip, and dissect it piece by piece. This is the quote right here. Training for aesthetics, is it good or bad? I find that for most people, it becomes a bad thing. So he's basically implying that most people that he sees getting involved with training for aesthetics, it turns out to be a bad thing. And obviously, I didn't have like the entire context for this, and the reason, like, that doesn't matter for this video because I'm not arguing his video or even him in general. I'm talking about this quote that he said that a lot of other people in the powerlifting community say, and which has led a lot of bodybuilders to kind of have this like community identity crisis and almost fall off the face of the earth. Like, natural bodybuilding almost kind of like died. So luckily we're starting to bring it back now. Let me dive in a little bit deeper to this argument and whether I agree with it or not. So I think the most important thing with Matt's argument is the culture of aesthetics. And within that, I even believe there's nuance. So when it comes to aesthetics, I do think there's a couple different subcultures within it that make up what aesthetics in general is. And obviously it's a very broad term, but if you've been involved with the lifting community and with the bodybuilding / aesthetics community, I think some of what I'm about to say will resonate pretty well with you, because I do believe there are 2 big aesthetic subcultures, and I think one is great, and I think one like has the potential to be great, but I think the one that Matt is referring to is this one that has the potential to be great and is great and can be great, but there are a lot of negative factors that come along with it, and I know that from being kind of involved in it myself and looking back as an older and more experienced lifter, where I can actually see like what's going wrong and how I hate the word toxic, but for the sake of the video, how toxic that community can be. And I really hope nobody clips that, because that, I guess it would be funny, whatever. I probably just gave someone an idea to quote that, but basically, in my experience, there are 2 types of aesthetic subcultures that I see. One is great, and one has the potential to be great, but is inferior in my opinion, and I'm going to give you my thoughts here. So the first one, for the sake of the video, I'm going to call it the negative side, or the side that has the potential to have a little bit more negativity throughout. This can be a narcissistic side that glorifies traits that are purely genetic, When people say training for aesthetics is feminine, this is the approach they are referring to. This is very niche, and I believe this is what Matt is referring to. So I'll give you guys, I'm not just going to explain this. I'm going to give you literal picture examples that I found, because the whole Instagram thing is a whole nother video for me to make, but I'll dive into that a little bit today too. So here's what I believe Matt is talking about. I do think he's referring to the people who are training for hypertrophy solely due to an underlying disorder. It can be common for people with body dysmorphia or eating disorders to become aesthetics obsessed in an unhealthy way. However, training for aesthetics is not the cause of the disorderly thinking in most cases. It's typically the other way around. So I think when you do see a lot of people that are just caught up in aesthetics in such an unhealthy way, like, you know, the guys that are always trying to be shredded all year round, and they think they're fat at like 12% body fat, and they're always like, everything's about food. It's all tracking my macros, and you can tell that's like, it's past that fine line of like, I'm taking my bodybuilding seriously, and it's into the territory of it's taking over your life and you're being obsessive about it. That is generally like that type of person, and the people that unfortunately have to experience and go through those horrible mental illnesses, those are the people that kind of end up in a part of that aesthetics community. And that's not even necessarily the part I'm talking about, but for the sake of this video, if I'm going to act like this is what Matt's talking about, I do want to say that I think people that get caught up in that portion of aesthetics, if it's very like toxic and it's a very bad mindset, I do think that they had the disorder anyways. And I think that aesthetics is just, and that type of lifestyle is just it's just revealing the disorder. And I think if bodybuilding wasn't a thing, it would just show itself in different ways. So I don't think it's the community, and I don't think it's the act of training for aesthetics that causes that. I do think that disorder comes before, and it's very attractive to people that unfortunately have to deal with things like that. But I'm not going to speak too much on it because I do not know a whole ton about body dysmorphia or eating disorders. I have never experienced that myself, so I definitely don't want to step out of my boundaries on that one. And actually kind of a perfect video for it, I'm going to stay in my lane. So let's see, where was I? Lots of aesthetics lifters tend to be clones of one another, and this is the true negative or potential to be negative aesthetics community that I'm talking about right here. Lots of aesthetics type lifters tend to be clones of one another and try to copy lifters ahead of them to look just like them. And this is going to be your classic like Instagram and TikTok fitness influencer. This will resonate with you guys. Have you ever noticed that they are all the same? Like the aesthetics community, they're all the same. Like they copy each other, from the songs they use to the clothes they wear to their clothing sponsors to the way they lift to the like way they film their videos. Like it's all the same. They literally copy each other. And I think that is bad for some people. And I think that can be toxic. I think that can be like a bad thing, like Matt says. I do think there are a lot of people that can thrive in that community, but I do think for a lot of people that can be a pretty bad part of aesthetics. So in that part, like if that's what Matt's talking about, I do kind of agree with that to an extent. But with that being said, you can't just say most people that train for aesthetics, it turns out to be a bad thing, because that is a tiny little niche. That is a tiny little niche in the whole bodybuilding community. That is like a small percentage. And if you were just to say, let's say for the sake of the argument, that's 5% of the industry, that's 5% of the community. If you're going to be a powerlifter and you're going to say the people that train for aesthetics, as in this tiny little portion of the community, ends up being a bad thing, you're discouraging the other 95% of the people that train for it in a healthy, positive way. That's their actual goal. And I do think that's an issue. So yes, are there bad parts to the aesthetics community? 100%, obviously, but it's a tiny portion. So to show you guys that that is a real thing, I'm not going to name drop one of these two people. I'm about to show you two lifters just so you guys can see how bad this portion actually can be and kind of the validity behind Matt's argument. Here is a picture of, I'm going to put it right here. This is a picture of David Lade, and I hate to name drop, but I just have to for this argument. And then this is a picture of not David Lade. Here's another. And then this is not David Lade right here. I blurred out the name, but it is not David Lade. Then here's another example. This is the last picture. This is David Lade. And then this right here is not David Lade. So I hate to name drop, and that's the first and last time I'll ever say someone's name, but I hope you guys can understand it's just for the sake of the argument. That is clearly a bad example of aesthetics, because that lifter, that young man, is copying another person, and he's never going to get any fulfillment or confidence from doing that. He's going to lose his entire sense of self. But I do believe that he will regain it, and I think lifting will eventually turn you into someone that brings you that confidence, but that is really bad. And that, yeah, that's bad. So the good side of aesthetics, this is where the video is going to get a little bit more positive. So the good side, this is the side that glorifies hard work and consistency and muscle building in creating your own original physique. This isn't as flashy on social media, but this subculture has the better mindset and approach, in my opinion. These lifters are very mindful of the difference between natural and enhanced lifters, and they don't chase someone else's exact physique and look. And just to give a few examples here, look at like the kind of underground fitness community. Like there's probably, I don't even know if I would like include myself in that yet, but like kind of, I guess, like a channel like mine, or even Carell, who I'm making this video in response to, there's another like 5 or 10 of us that kind of make videos in like this old school style that I make. And the one thing you'll notice about us is none of us are the same person. We're all totally different. We all have our own highly individual personalities, and we're all highly confident in what we do and what we talk about. And we all can disagree with each other on certain things and still respect each other like crazy. And you'll see people like us respect powerlifters because that's what builds the community, and we have different goals and we don't try and copy them, but we respect them, and it's mutual respect when you are a lifter like that. So I believe this, when you truly develop your own goals and go into aesthetics / bodybuilding. I don't like calling it aesthetics. I like to call it bodybuilding, even if you are trying to chase like an aesthetic physique. So this is where you truly reap the benefits of hypertrophy training and building muscles. So I think the difference between that like bad aesthetics and like the good aesthetics is going to be the bad aesthetics. You're chasing a person. You're literally trying to copy a lifter that's just like a couple years older than you, that doesn't even have all of his stuff figured out yet. And that's not good. To try and copy another person, that's terrible. So when it comes to the good side of aesthetics and the good side of bodybuilding, those people are generally chasing more of like the muscle building approach. They're trying to build as much muscle as possible and build it in the parts that they want to build it, but they're chasing their own physique. Like they're building what they want. You'll see a lot of like the bad aesthetics. They're drawn to traits that are purely genetic, and I don't think that's a good thing. Like you'll see the people that are kind of involved with that whole like David Lade type community. I know there's a bunch of other like younger guys that have come in now. It's generally the teenagers. They're all drawn to genetic bodybuilding. They're all drawn to like a tiny waist and broad shoulders and like the perfect muscle bellies, and like it's all purely genetic. Like they're into like guys' heights. Like they care if someone's tall in a bodybuilder. Like it's just odd stuff that has like nothing to do with bodybuilding. And you'll generally see that the good side of bodybuilding, or the good side of aesthetics, is purely like a muscle building focused community. Like we compare not how broad our shoulders are from a bone structure standpoint or how small our waist is. We compare muscle to muscle, and we're focused on who can build the most muscle, which is something that's 100% in your control. So when people say like that aesthetics community is feminine or it's like toxic or bad, it's because there is a tiny little subculture that just chases they worry about their genetics. They worry about like the small waist and the wide shoulders and the how many abs they have. Like they have a 6-pack or 8-pack. They worry about like their muscle bellies, and they try and copy each other's physiques. Like, I'm just going to keep it real here. That is bad. That's a bad community, but it's a very small subculture, so I do disagree with Matt just for that reason. If that was the entire bodybuilding community, I'd say, yeah, it's probably not so good, but there's way too much of a big, good, positive bodybuilding community to just dismiss it like that, like he did, and like powerlifters do. So I do believe it's better to compare muscle mass to muscle mass, because that's something that's completely within our control. Like, I'm not saying genetics are entirely out of the equation, but in a general sense, I know I had my genetics video a couple months back, which had some good points. Maybe I missed the mark on a couple things, but muscle mass is very much so within our control. Whether we all have different potentials, we're kind of yet to discover that, but it's entirely within our control. When you're trying to compare yourself to someone that just has a different genetic makeup and you're comparing your genetic traits, that's bad. That is a bad portion of aesthetics, but luckily that's a very small portion of the community. And I think at this point we have enough of a good philosophy and a good argument against that mindset to where we can actually thrive in overall bodybuilding and building up our own physiques. So that is my take. I know I kind of went on a rant there. So to sum it up, I do not agree with Matt's take. I think it just doesn't make a whole ton of sense to dismiss an entire community when like a small portion of it's bad. So yeah, are there like bad portions of the aesthetics community? Sure, but you can't just dismiss it like that and say most people that get into it ends up being bad. Like, it's just not a very well thought out take. And again, nothing with Matt, it's just happened to be the clip used. This has been said by a lot of people within the powerlifting community. So a niche subculture of aesthetics does have its issues, but that's a small portion that you should avoid at all costs. So part 2, do I agree with Carell? Do I agree with what the clip that he put together? Yes. I'm sure you guys could have guessed that by now, but we obviously have somewhat similar training philosophies, and obviously I'm going to agree with that just because it's similar to stuff that I say on this channel. So I have experience being talked out of my goal of building muscle and substituting it for chasing powerlifting numbers. Because of this, I make sure to stay in my lane as much as possible. Before anyone calls me a hypocrite because I shit on powerlifting, you need to understand everything I say is in relation to hypertrophy training. There's nothing wrong with powerlifting, and for many it's a great hobby to pick up, but for bodybuilders you should avoid it at all costs. So yeah, I don't think it's okay to try and like talk someone out or fearmonger someone out of an entire community. Some people would see that at first glance and say, oh, well, basement bodybuilding, you're a hypocrite because you shit on powerlifting all the time. But I do for people that are training for bodybuilding, like, obviously. And I don't know how many of you guys actually think that. Like, I know most people that follow this channel are very smart people. So just to clarify that, I shit on powerlifting when you try and combine it with your bodybuilding training and you're looking for optimal hypertrophy results. That's not going to end well. You just can't do two things at once. You have to sacrifice both, and generally one to a very large extent. So another point that I have here is a lot of people say, so let me recatch myself here. So basically, another argument is the whole like identity crisis argument. And most people say, and I did see a comment that said this, a lot of people, it was saying that most people, if not all people, are training for power building. They care about muscle and they care about strength. A quick point I have here that I'll touch on later in the video is going to be, why is my channel already picking up traction? It's because people relate to what I say, and very few people, if anyone, says what I say on this channel. So what we've seen go on for a long time now is power building has been the thing. It's been trendy. It's been big. When I have a channel like this that literally just started, and I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or like talk all good things about my channel. Like, obviously I'm a tiny channel. I have like 2,000 or so subscribers, which I don't really care about how many subscribers I have. I care about interacting with the community. I think that's the most important thing. That's why I have my channel. Like, if I cared about the sub count, I would probably not film this in my basement on my iPhone. And I said that before, but why did my videos pick up traction so quick? Like, how did I start a channel 3 months ago and my videos are already getting 1,000 to 4,000 views every time? Like, that's because people relate to them. And I talk about pure hypertrophy training. I'm not talking about power building or powerlifting and just getting that audience. Like, the people that watch my videos, they like what I have to say and they relate to it. I'm not this like groundbreaking scientist or like flashy vlogger. Like, it's just raw videos and people relate to them. Like, if people actually just cared about power building and powerlifting, nobody would watch my channel. So yeah, it's still a tiny channel. I get that. But for me to have that many people watch my videos and comment and subscribe and stick with it, and for my channel to just grow that fast, it says something that there's something missing within the community, and I will elaborate on that a little bit more in this video. So overall, is this stuff divisive? And this is just a very quick thought. I'm going to say no, because what causes division is a lack of respect, and respect is created through respecting other communities and individuals with different goals. Powerlifters have repeatedly treated hypertrophy training as inferior by trying to give minimalist advice, and that has led to division between the communities. So that's kind of an intro to part 3. So part 3 is going to be, how does this affect the community? So is this like an identity crisis, or is it in general more of like a training issue when you're getting down to like the technicals of how to train for each goal? It's not an identity crisis. Karel hosted me on his channel to debunk the just get stronger mindset to get bigger, which we debunked pretty thoroughly. We weren't attacking the community of power building. We were dismantling their methods by pointing out its flaws with literal logic. And thanks to Karel, he goes to school for philosophy, so we literally debunked power building and the whole, not necessarily power building, but we debunked the whole just get stronger myth, which kind of is powerlifting and bodybuilding, with literal logic. Like, he understands logic on a philosophical level, and we debunked that argument. So I think that says a lot there. An identity crisis would be caused by a lack of confidence in oneself. Natural bodybuilding is recovering from an identity crisis induced by powerlifters. For one, powerlifters generally don't know as much about bodybuilding as bodybuilders do themselves, so they have a minimalist mindset and give out literal garbage advice sometimes. It's one thing to critique a method with facts and logic, but it's not a good idea to follow up with garbage advice. And here's an example of this. So, how many times have you heard, stop worrying about X, just get stronger? Like, that's a good point about powerlifters giving out advice to bodybuilders. So you'll see this, and I get where they're coming from. I do empathize with it. You'll see, like, bodybuilders that are clueless and they're just taking steroids, and then people try and follow that advice, and we all know the whole fake natty thing. So powerlifters will say, oh, garbage, don't worry about that bodybuilder, he's just dumb, which is right, and that's totally fine to say, and you can leave it there. But when you say, nope, don't worry about mind-muscle connection, don't worry about high reps, and don't worry about the pump or isolation lifts, just get stronger. So it's a resentful, minimalistic approach, and instead of just saying, no, that's not a good approach, they're saying, oh, and that's dumb, just do this. When you say just do something, it's a little bit too minimalistic to actually be some legit advice. So they totally missed the mark on that. So I applaud powerlifters for calling out certain BS within bodybuilding, but when you follow it up with something like just get stronger or something as basic as that, you're giving out pretty bad advice, and you should stay in your lane with that. That's why I don't give out powerlifting advice, because I stay in my lane, and I would like for everybody to do the same. But at the same time, I respect powerlifters and I respect powerlifting, and I would hope they do the same to us. So those are my thoughts there. And again, why do people resonate so much with my channel? So that was another comment on Karel's video, is everybody just wants to power build. And no, my argument there is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say no. I believe power building and worrying about strength is a cultural goal. I believe if you entered the power building community with a goal of hypertrophy and came out with a goal of strength, that goal was chosen for you by others and you were influenced into it, especially if you're a newer lifter, since many lifters lack conviction within their own goals. So you'll see this a lot. This argument that, oh no, everybody just wants to get stronger and bigger. Like, we all want the best of both worlds. Are there people that want that? Sure, but we don't really know that, because since our goals are clearly so heavily influenced by the community, by the culture of lifting, are those truly our goals? Like, if powerlifting wasn't a thing, how many people would want to just go in the gym to get stronger? If bodybuilding wasn't a thing and it was only powerlifting, how many people would want to go and just bodybuild? I think if you remove the culture entirely and take people's goals upon what they wanted to join the gym for, get involved with fitness for, I think I'd actually argue most people would just want to get big and they won't care about their strength. I think the difference between bodybuilding and powerlifting, and this is the reason, I'm not just going to say, oh, I think or I believe most people want to bodybuild. This is my reasoning. So you have bodybuilding and you have powerlifting. So I respect powerlifting a ton, but it's definitely different than bodybuilding. With bodybuilding, you go to the gym to get the results outside of the gym. Like, we don't care about impressing other people in the gym. We're not worried about our numbers and whatever. And I'm not saying that's what powerlifters are, but that's besides the point. You go to bodybuild, and that applies to everything in life. When you have a bigger physique and you feel confident and you look the way that you want to do, that applies to everywhere in life, whether it's like your social life or your work life or whatever. Like, that applies to everything. It makes you a better person. And I'm not saying you can't get that through powerlifting, but in a broad sense, powerlifting is much more niche. Powerlifting is a very specific skill set. It's a very specific strength in sport that's within the domain of the gym. And bodybuilding is, at least recreational bodybuilding, I'm not talking about competitive bodybuilding, takes place in the entire domain of life. So I'm going to leave the video at that. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd be more than happy to continue the discussion with anyone. So yeah, thanks for watching.